Ever heard that expression, about making a deal with the devil?
Hmm.
Well, that's kind of what we're diving into today, this whole Operation Paperclip thing.
Yeah, the U.S. government bringing Nazi scientists over after World War II. It's complicated.
Complicated is an understatement, right? I mean,
Right.
we're talking rocket scientists, chemical weapons experts.
Aviation medicine, even.
Yeah,
Fields where the Nazis were, no denying it, way ahead of the curve.
exactly. And to guide us through all of this, we've got Annie Jacobsen's book, Operation Paperclip, the secret intelligence program that brought Nazi scientists to America. And just to be clear, this isn't just about like the space race and rockets, although that's a big part of it. We're
Yeah.
going to dig into the moral compromises, the lengths the U.S. government went to secure this scientific advantage.
It really forces you to ask that question. Can you separate scientific progress from where it came from? Especially when it's connected to something as horrific as the Nazi regime.
It's a tough one for sure. So, to really wrap our heads around all this, we got to rewind a bit, go back to the end of World War II. Picture this, right? The Allies have won, but now there's this new threat, the Soviet Union.
Another superpower, vying for global dominance. And in this new kind of war, the Cold War, science and technology, that was the new battleground.
And the atomic bomb, I mean, that changed everything. Suddenly, both the U.S. and the Soviets are scrambling, desperate to outdo each other.
It was a whole new arms race.
Yeah.
And the U.S., they knew they needed an edge.
They realized defeating Germany, it wasn't enough. They had to, I guess you could say, they had to use the enemy's knowledge, tap into the minds that had given Germany its technological prowess in the first place. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And that's where Operation Paperclip comes into play. It was a gamble, no doubt, a bet that the knowledge these Nazi scientists had could be, I don't know, repurposed, used to counter this new Soviet threat.
A gamble with some pretty high stakes. And even within the U.S. government, I mean, you had these different factions, people with very different ideas about how to handle all of this.
Right, totally. You had groups like the Alsos mission. Their job was to figure out how far along the Nazis were with their nuclear program.
Yeah.
But they also had orders to, like, identify any scientists who might be, persuaded to switch sides. And then there was CIOS, the Combined Intelligence Objective Subcommittee. They were gathering intel on German technology, infrastructure, everything.
Wow. So a lot of moving parts. So you've got some people who want to bring these Nazi scientists to justice, while others are saying, hey, these guys are valuable assets in the fight against communism.
Yeah, it was messy. And Jacobsen actually, she sets the scene really well right at the beginning of her book. There's this banquet, right, for these captured Nazi scientists. And it's being held, get this, right next to a V-2 rocket launch site.
Oh, wow. Talk about a contradiction. I mean, it's like celebrating scientific progress right there in the shadow of these weapons of war. And we can't forget those V-2 rockets, they were built with slave labor.
Yeah, and that really highlights the ethical tightrope the U.S. was walking, trying to extract valuable information from people who were complicit in horrific acts. It's a theme that runs through the entire Operation Paperclip story.
It's wild, right? We're talking rockets to the moon, but Operation Paperclip, there's a whole other side to it.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just about space race glory. Jacobsen, she gets into some dark territory.
That's right. We're talking chemical weapons now.
Yeah. Nerve agents, to be specific. Taboon, sarin. Jacobsen's book, it lays out how the U.S. recruited chemists, some of them directly involved in developing this stuff.
Hold on, those names, Taboon, sarin, those
Yeah.
weren't just like theoretical projects, right? Those were...
Used in the war,
Yeah.
absolutely. Against civilians, horrific effects.
It's just hard to wrap your head around. The U.S. government working with people who, I mean...
It's a lot to unpack. Like this one case, Dr. Walter Schieber, high-ranking SS officer, key player in the Nazi chemical weapons program.
And we brought him over.
See, that's the thing with Operation Paperclip, this constant tension. Schieber, brilliant scientist, yeah, but complicit in terrible things. So what do you do? How do you balance that potential for scientific gain against,
His past, it's like trying to separate the science from the scientist, but is that even possible?
exactly. And it's not just Schieber. Jacobsen, she does it throughout the book, shows how these contradictions played out. Take the Nuremberg doctors' trial.
Okay, so on the one hand, you've got the U.S. putting Nazi doctors on trial for war crimes, these horrific medical experiments.
Right, trying to hold them accountable for what happened in the camps, drawing a line in the sand, saying never again to using science that way.
And yet, at the same time, you've got Operation Paperclip happening in secret. It's almost like...
Two different worlds,
Right.
trying to have it both ways.
Trying to make a distinction where maybe there shouldn't be one.
It's messy. ethically speaking.
Yeah.
And it gets even more complicated when you look at the individual stories. Like, there's this one doctor, Theodore Benzinger. Oh, you probably don't recognize the name, but
Okay.
ever used an ear thermometer
Wait a minute. Are you saying?
invented by Benzinger, who, before coming to the U.S., was involved with those high-altitude experiments at Dachau.
No way. Seriously.
It's all connected. And that's really what makes Operation Paperclip so fascinating, so unsettling. It's all these things tangled together: scientific progress, wartime atrocities, the Cold War, and it forces us to ask, was it worth it?
That's the question, isn't it? Did we pay too high a price for this knowledge?
It's a debate that's still going on. And honestly, there are no easy answers. But by understanding this history, by grappling with these complexities, maybe, just maybe, we can be more mindful of the choices we make today.
You know, it's almost like, I don't know, it's almost too crazy to believe, right? Like something out of a movie, making deals with these guys, keeping it all hush-hush.
Yeah, the secrecy, that was huge. I mean, Jacobsen, she talks about this, how Operation Paperclip, it was shrouded in secrecy right from the get-go, classified documents, downplaying those Nazi connections, anything to control the story.
Can you imagine if word got out? I mean, the public would have gone nuts, right?
Oh, totally. They knew it would be a PR nightmare.
But they couldn't keep it under wraps forever, could they?
Well, nobody's perfect. Jacobsen, she mentions this one case, Dr. Walter Schreiber, another high-ranking Nazi doctor. He ends up in the U.S., living under a fake name for a while, until the truth comes out.
Busted.
Yeah, and it caused a huge uproar. Big embarrassment for the U.S. government.
You'd think that would have been the end of it, or at least made them rethink the whole thing, right?
You'd think so. But it was the Cold War, remember?
Yeah.
That fear of the Soviets that kind of trumped everything else.
So they're willing to look the other way, turn a blind eye to the past, all in the name of national security.
Pretty much. It's a tough pill to swallow looking back on it now. Raises a lot of questions about the price of progress, you know?
Definitely. So where does that leave us? I mean, how are we supposed to view Operation Paperclip today?
That's the million-dollar question. It's messy, uncomfortable history. And it forces us to confront some tough realities about scientific ambition, about the choices people make under pressure, about the blurry line between, right and wrong.
Yeah. Easy to judge with hindsight, but we weren't there, right? In the thick of the Cold War, that constant fear of nuclear war.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Operation Paperclip so fascinating, so relevant even today. History, it's rarely black and white. More often than not, it's this big, messy gray area.
Makes you think about the choices we're facing today, right? With things like AI, genetic engineering, the potential for both good and bad. It's all there.
Totally. If anything, Operation Paperclip, it's a cautionary tale. A reminder to be mindful, to ask tough questions about where progress comes from and what price we might be paying for it. Absolutely. Well, on that note, I want to thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Operation Paperclip. It's been quite a journey.
My pleasure. And to everyone listening, if you're intrigued, and I imagine many of you are, I encourage you to check out Annie Jacobsen's book. It's a wild ride.
It really is. And remember, history, it's full of surprises, twists and turns you might not expect. So the next time you hear about some amazing scientific breakthrough, just remember, there might be a much deeper and maybe even darker story behind it. Thanks for listening, everybody.